I am Deanna Walker, 34 years old, and the proud owner of Willowbrook Estate, the most sought-after wedding venue in Connecticut. When my little sister Alicia announced her engagement last year, I was overjoyed. Despite our complicated family dynamic, especially with my stepmother Margaret, I looked forward to being part of her special day. As the wedding approached, a sense of unease grew within me. Then came that call. "You're uninvited from the wedding," the planner said coldly. "Family's orders," I replied. "I understand." She hung up smugly. 20 minutes later, she called back panicking. "Miss Deanna, we didn't know you own the entire venue." Before I tell you how I turned this wedding disaster into the most important lesson of my life, drop a comment where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to family drama. Growing up, Alicia was my shadow. Despite our 6-year age difference, we were inseparable. I still remember her toddling after me with her stuffed rabbit, begging to be included in whatever I was doing. I never minded. Having a little sister was like having a built-in best friend who thought everything I did was magical. Our mother Elizabeth encouraged our bond. She would say, "Sisters are forever friends," and make sure we resolved our little squabbles before bedtime. Mom was our foundation, the warm center of our family home in suburban Connecticut. She made our modest house feel like a palace with her homemade curtains and Sunday dinners that somehow stretched to feed unexpected guests. Everything changed when Mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. I was 16, Alicia just 10. The 18 months that followed were a blur of hospital visits, whispered adult conversations, and me trying to maintain normalcy for my sister, while our father Abraham fell apart at the seams. I grew up overnight, cooking meals, helping Alicia with homework, and visiting Mom in the hospital after school. When Mom died, it felt like the light went out in our home. Dad retreated into his grief and work, leaving me to essentially raise Alicia. I postponed college applications to stay home that year, unwilling to abandon my sister when she needed stability most. Those nights holding Alicia while she cried herself to sleep are etched in my memory. We clung to each other, our shared grief creating an unbreakable bond. Or so I thought. 3 years after Mom died, Dad met Margaret at a work function. She was polished, efficient, and clearly interested in providing the maternal presence our family lacked. At 19, I was cautiously optimistic. Alicia, at 13, was desperate for a mother figure and embraced Margaret instantly. The wedding was small, and I remember feeling a twinge of betrayal on behalf of my mother, followed immediately by guilt. Dad deserved happiness, and Alicia needed a female role model as she entered her teenage years. I pushed aside my reservations and welcomed Margaret with open arms. The subtle shifts began almost immediately. Margaret took a special interest in Alicia, shopping for clothes, arranging playdates with the daughters of her friends, and enrolling her in the right summer camps. It was always framed as what Elizabeth would have wanted, making it impossible to object without seeming bitter. Meanwhile, Margaret treated me with cool politeness. My opinions were dismissed as immature, my household contributions criticized as not up to standard. When I mentioned college applications, Margaret enthusiastically supported the idea, researching schools that were conveniently far from home. By 20, I recognized the pattern. Margaret wanted Alicia as her do-over daughter, the one she could mold from adolescence. I was a reminder of the family that existed before her, too shaped by my mother's influence to be reshaped. After a particularly heated argument about Alicia's birthday celebration, where my ideas were completely overruled, I made the painful decision to move out. I found a tiny studio apartment and took every hospitality job I could find. Waitressing mornings at a diner, bartending nights at a hotel, weekend catering gigs during wedding season. I was determined to build my own life while staying connected to Alicia. Margaret made this increasingly difficult. Weekend visits were often inconvenient. Phone calls were monitored. Alicia's schedule became mysteriously packed whenever I had free time. Dad noticed, but chose peace over confrontation. "Margaret is just protective," he would say. "Give it time." Despite these obstacles, I made sure Alicia knew I was always there for her. I attended every school play, graduation, and important event, even when my seat was far from the family section. I sent care packages during her college years and took her to lunch whenever she could escape Margaret's orbit. Meanwhile, I was building something for myself. Working in hospitality had sparked my interest in event planning. I noticed the gaps in service, the untapped markets, the inefficiencies that frustrated clients. I started taking business classes at community college, networking with vendors, and saving every penny. When Alicia called last year to announce her engagement to Richard Davis, heir to a regional banking fortune, I was genuinely happy for her. At 28, she had finished law school and started her career at a prestigious firm. Richard seemed kind and clearly adored her. During our congratulatory lunch, Alicia gushed about wedding plans and mentioned her dream of a garden ceremony. I always imagined getting married somewhere like Willowbrook, she sighed, unaware of my secret smile. But those places book up years in advance, and they cost a fortune. I might be able to help with that, I said cautiously, not wanting to overstep. Margaret had already appointed herself wedding planner-in-chief, according to Alicia's texts. Really? Do you know someone? Alicia perked up, her eyes bright with hope. For a moment, I considered keeping my success to myself. Margaret had spent years minimizing my achievements while elevating Alicia's. But this was my sister, and her happiness mattered more than old resentments. I more than know someone, I said, reaching for her hand. I own Willowbrook Estate. My journey to owning Willowbrook Estate began with an unlikely opportunity. After 5 years of working multiple jobs and saving religiously, I had a modest nest egg and a wealth of industry connections. At 25, I was managing events at an upscale hotel when I overheard a regular guest lamenting the state of her family property. Willowbrook has been in the family for generations, but nobody wants the responsibility anymore, she told her companion. The maintenance alone is crippling. We're thinking of selling to developers, but it breaks my heart to imagine it carved into condominiums. I approached her carefully, introduced myself, and asked about the property. Willowbrook was a 10-acre estate with a 19th-century manor house, expansive gardens, and several outbuildings. Once a showplace, it had fallen into genteel decay as the family fortunes waned. The guest, Eleanor Bradford, seemed surprised by my interest, but agreed to show me the property. The moment I stepped onto the grounds, I knew. Despite the overgrown gardens and peeling paint, Willowbrook had a timeless charm that modern venues couldn't replicate. The light filtering through ancient oak trees, the secret garden with its crumbling stone walls, the grand ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows, I could envision it all restored to glory. This could be the premier wedding destination in Connecticut, I told Eleanor, unable to contain my excitement. The bones are perfect. She seemed amused by my enthusiasm, but doubtful. That would take hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of work. I have a business plan, I said, though in truth I was furiously calculating figures in my head. Would you consider seller financing? I could make a down payment now and pay the rest as the business grows. To my amazement, Eleanor was receptive. She preferred seeing Willowbrook restored rather than demolished, and my passion reminded her of her grandmother, who had lovingly maintained the estate. Within months, we had an agreement. The terms were ambitious. I would need to generate significant revenue quickly, but I was undaunted. The first year was brutal. I lived in the caretaker's cottage to save money, working restoration projects by day, and planning my business strategy by night. Every dollar went back into the property. I cultivated relationships with top wedding vendors, offering discounted rates for photo shoots to get Willowbrook featured in bridal magazines. I leveraged my hotel contacts to create partnerships with luxury accommodations for out-of-town guests. Gradually, Willowbrook transformed. The gardens bloomed again. The ballroom gleamed with restored hardwood floors, and modern amenities were discreetly integrated into the historic setting. By year 3, we were booking weddings 18 months in advance. By year 5, we had a wait list, and had been featured in national publications as a destination venue. Through it all, I shared little of my success with my family. Dad knew I owned an event business, but seemed vague on the details. Alicia assumed I managed the property for someone else. Margaret simply didn't ask. I stopped seeking their approval years ago, finding validation instead in my growing business and the beautiful community I'd built among my staff and industry colleagues. So, when Alicia mentioned Willowbrook as her dream venue, I felt a complicated mixture of pride, amusement, and trepidation. Her reaction to my revelation was everything I could have hoped for. "You own Willowbrook?" she gasped, eyes widening. "The Willowbrook estate? With the famous rose garden and that amazing crystal chandelier? Deanna, how did I not know this?" I shrugged, trying to seem nonchalant, though her genuine amazement warmed my heart. "You've been busy with law school and your career, and it's not like the family asks much about my work." Alicia had the grace to look embarrassed. "I should have paid more attention. This is incredible, Deanna. You built this all yourself?" "Every square inch," I confirmed, "and it would be my honor to host your wedding there. Consider it my gift to you and Richard." Alicia's eyes filled with tears. "That's too generous. Willowbrook must cost a fortune to book." "About $75,000 for the package you'd want," I said matter-of-factly. "But you're my sister. Your wedding should be at the most beautiful venue in Connecticut, and I happen to know the owner." We laughed, and for the first time in years, I felt truly connected to my sister. She hugged me tightly, whispering thank you repeatedly. We spent the afternoon touring the property, with Alicia gasping at each new discovery. Watching her excitement, I allowed myself to hope this wedding might bridge the distance that had grown between us. The reality check came swiftly in the form of Margaret. Alicia insisted on bringing her and Dad to Willowbrook the following weekend. Dad was genuinely impressed, clapping me on the back and saying, "You've done good, kiddo," with tears in his eyes. Margaret's reaction was more measured. "It's certainly rustic," she said, eyeing the 200-year-old oak beams in the reception hall. "I suppose that's the aesthetic some people prefer." I bit my tongue, reminding myself this was about Alicia. "The historic elements are what make Willowbrook special, but we've updated all the important modern amenities," I explained, professional despite the slight. "Our brides appreciate that balance of character and comfort." "Speaking of brides," Margaret said, turning to Alicia, "I've taken the liberty of contacting Amanda Pierce about planning the wedding. You remember Amanda? Her daughter was in your prep school. She does all the important events in Greenwich." That was the beginning of my systematic exclusion from the planning process. Despite owning the venue, my input was treated as interference. Amanda Pierce arrived at our first meeting with a portfolio of weddings that looked identical, all safe, traditional, and utterly lacking in personality. She referred to me as the venue representative rather than Alicia's sister, and repeatedly made comments about working within the limitations of the space. Actually, I tried to explain, showing her our catalog of previous events. Willowbrook is incredibly versatile. We've hosted everything from traditional ceremonies to themed celebrations. Whatever vision Alicia has, we can accommodate it. "We appreciate your input," Amanda said dismissively, "but I think we'll stick with what works reliably." Now, about the vendor restrictions. "There are no required vendors at Willowbrook," I clarified. "We have preferred partners who know the property well, but clients are welcome to bring in their own choices." "How unusual," Amanda said with a thin smile. "Most quality venues maintain stricter control." Throughout the meeting, Alicia remained mostly silent, looking between Amanda and Margaret whenever a decision point arose. I could see her enthusiasm being systematically replaced with anxiety. When she did suggest something, like using the secret garden for the ceremony, Margaret would quickly redirect. "Outdoor ceremonies are so unpredictable, darling. The ballroom is much more suitable for someone of Richard's family standing." By the end of that first planning session, I felt like an outsider in my own venue. As everyone was leaving, I pulled Alicia aside. "Are you happy with how things are shaping up?" I asked gently. "Because this is your wedding, not Margaret's," or Amanda's. Willowbrook can be anything you want it to be. Alicia squeezed my hand. I know, and I appreciate it so much. Margaret is just trying to help, and she has connections to all the right people. It'll be easier if I let her handle some things. I nodded, recognizing the pattern, but unwilling to create tension when Alicia already seemed stressed. Just remember I'm here if you need anything. Literally anything. That night, Dad called, asking me to meet him for coffee the next day. I hoped he'd recognized the dynamics at play and wanted to intervene. Instead, he asked for my patience. Margaret means well, he said, stirring his coffee endlessly. She wants Alicia's wedding to be perfect. So do I pointed out. It's why I offered Willowbrook in the first place. Dad sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. I know, sweetheart, and it's incredibly generous. But Margaret has always been sensitive about your independence. The way you built your life without needing us. Without needing her, you mean? I said quietly. Dad, she pushed me away from day one. That's not entirely fair, he protested weakly. She was trying to find her place in a ready-made family. It was difficult for everyone. I recognized the futility of this conversation, one we'd had variations of for 15 years. What are you asking me to do exactly? Just go along with Margaret's ideas when you can. Let her feel included. She's invested in this wedding. And when her ideas don't work for the venue, or when they make Alicia unhappy, Dad looked away. Try to find compromises. Please, Deanna, for the family peace. I agreed. Not because I thought he was right, but because I loved him and Alicia. I didn't realize then how completely I would be expected to compromise myself away. The systematic exclusion began subtly. A cake tasting I wasn't informed about. A meeting with the florist rescheduled without my knowledge. Each time, the excuse was benign. An oversight, a miscommunication, a last-minute change. I tried to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, reminding myself that wedding planning was chaotic even without complicated family dynamics. Then I noticed a pattern in my text exchanges with Alicia. Her once enthusiastic messages became increasingly brief and formal. When I suggested meeting for lunch to discuss the wedding, her replies came hours later, with vague excuses about her busy schedule. Our easy banter disappeared, replaced by the kind of polite distance I associated with casual acquaintances, not sisters who had once shared everything. Working late again? Can't make dinner. Sorry, became her standard response. When we did manage to connect, Alicia seemed distracted and guarded, checking her phone frequently, as if expecting important messages. 6 weeks into the planning process, I overheard a conversation that explained the change. I was inspecting the ballroom lighting with my maintenance manager when Margaret's voice drifted through the open French doors from the terrace where she sat with Alicia. Darling, I know you want to include Deanna, but you need to understand she's just jealous of your happiness, Margaret was saying, in that reasonable tone she perfected years ago. She's never had a serious relationship, and now her little sister is having this magnificent wedding. It's natural she'd try to control everything. Deanna's not like that, Alicia protested, but her voice lacked conviction. She's being really generous with the venue. Of course she is, Margaret said smoothly. It's wonderful publicity for her business. But notice how she questions every decision Amanda makes? How she's always suggesting alternatives to our plans. That's not helpfulness. That's control. I stood frozen, torn between storming outside to defend myself and retreating to process this betrayal. My maintenance manager, sensing my distress, made an excuse about checking the electrical panel and left me alone with my thoughts. Margaret was rewriting my intentions, casting my professional expertise as jealousy and my desire to give Alicia her dream wedding as a business calculation. Worse, she was succeeding. I could hear the doubt in Alicia's voice, the wavering loyalty. I chose retreat that day, unwilling to create a scene at my own venue. Looking back, I wonder if confronting Margaret then might have changed everything that followed. Instead, I threw myself into work, maintaining a professional distance from the wedding planning, while trying to preserve whatever connection remained with Alicia. Meanwhile, Amanda Pierce's attitude shifted from dismissive to openly antagonistic. During a site inspection with vendors, she contradicted my safety recommendations about candle placement near the historic draperies. "Miss Walker is being unnecessarily cautious," she told the decorator with an eye roll. "I've planned dozens of events, with much more elaborate candle displays, not in 200-year-old buildings with original woodwork," I countered, maintaining a professional tone. "Fire safety isn't negotiable at Willowbrook. We can achieve the same aesthetic with flameless candles in those areas. This is why working with family is so difficult," Amanda said with an exaggerated sigh. "They think personal connection entitles them to override professional expertise." The irony of her statement might have been amusing if it weren't so infuriating. I was the professional being overridden at every turn. When I raised concerns about the proposed guest count exceeding our safe capacity, I was labeled difficult. When I pointed out that their timeline didn't allow for proper setup, I was micromanaging. When I suggested the garden cocktail hour they planned would be challenging in high heels, I was overthinking. Each interaction left me increasingly frustrated and concerned. This wasn't just about my feelings anymore. These decisions affected safety, guest comfort, and ultimately Alicia's wedding experience. But my attempts to contact Alicia directly were now met with silence or deflected to Amanda. The final blow came when I discovered through Instagram that a bridesmaid's luncheon had been held at Willowbrook without my knowledge. My own staff had been instructed not to inform me, believing the directive came from the bride. Photos showed Alicia, her college friends, Margaret, and even my father smiling in the garden pavilion I had lovingly restored with my own hands. There was no acknowledgement of my absence, no empty chair symbolizing a missing bridesmaid, because that was another detail I had learned secondhand. Not only was I apparently not maid of honor material, I wasn't even in the bridal party. The realization stung more than I wanted to admit. Despite our age difference, Alicia and I had always talked about being each other's maid of honor someday. It was a promise made late at night after Mom's funeral, a whispered assurance that we would still share life's important moments even without her. That evening, I attended the official bridal shower hosted at Margaret's Country Club. I hadn't received a formal invitation, but was told by Alicia's maid of honor, Rebecca, that of course you're welcome to come. I brought a carefully selected gift, a delicate silver picture frame containing a restored photo of our mother holding infant Alicia, with me, age 6, proudly helping support my sister's head. It was one of the few photos where all three Walker women appeared together, and I had spent considerable time and money having it professionally restored. At the shower, I was seated at the outermost table with distant acquaintances, far from the family section. When gifts were opened, Margaret presided beside Alicia, carefully recording each item and giver. When my turn came, Alicia unwrapped the frame with a puzzled expression that quickly transformed to tears when she recognized the photo. "Oh," she said softly, touching our mother's face in the image. For a moment, I saw my real sister again, not the polished, distant version Margaret had cultivated. Margaret swiftly took the frame. "How thoughtful," she said without meeting my eyes. "We'll find a nice spot for this at home." She placed it aside and promptly moved on to the next gift, a crystal vase from one of her friends that received effusive praise. As the party wound down, I overheard Margaret speaking with two of her friends near the restroom, unaware of my presence. "It's all arranged," she was saying in a satisfied tone. "Amanda has it handled. Deanna won't be a problem at the wedding." "Are you sure that's wise?" one friend asked. "She does own the venue, after all." "The contract is signed," Margaret replied confidently. "And she'd never do anything to hurt Alicia's big day. She'll accept the situation, once it's presented properly." I slipped away before they could notice me, my mind racing. What exactly did "won't be a problem" mean? And what situation was I supposed to accept? I tried calling Alicia that night but got her voicemail. My text asking for a sister coffee date the next morning went unanswered. Even my father was suddenly unavailable when I called, his secretary at the law firm, informing me he was in depositions all day. The sense of isolation was complete. Whatever Margaret had planned, she had successfully cut off my communication with both Alicia and Dad. I went to bed that night with a sense of foreboding, unaware that the next day would bring the confrontation that would either destroy our family completely or force a long overdue reckoning. The call came at 9:17 on Friday morning, exactly 8 days before the wedding. I remember checking my watch because I was expecting a delivery of imported linens for another event, not a call from Amanda Pierce. "Miss Walker," she began without preamble, her tone professionally detached. "I'm calling regarding the Davis Walker wedding next Saturday." "Yes?" I responded, setting down my coffee. Something in her voice triggered my internal alarms. "There's been a change to the guest list I need to inform you about." A pause, perfectly calculated. "You're uninvited from the wedding. Family's orders." The words landed like physical blows. Uninvited. From my sister's wedding. At my own venue. I gripped the edge of my desk, grateful Amanda couldn't see my face. "I understand," I replied, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. "Good," Amanda said, unable to hide the smug satisfaction in her tone. "The family feels this is best for everyone involved. The contract for the venue remains valid, of course. Your staff will be expected to provide all services as agreed." "Of course," I echoed hollowly. "Then we're clear. Goodbye, Miss Walker." She hung up before I could respond, though I had nothing else to say. The phone slipped from my fingers to the desk as the reality washed over me. My own sister had banished me from her wedding. No explanation, no personal call, just a cold dismissal through a third party. For several minutes, I sat perfectly still, trying to process what had happened. The pain was physical, a tightness in my chest that made it difficult to breathe. Tears burned behind my eyes but didn't fall. I felt strangely disconnected, as if watching someone else's tragedy unfold. Then the analytical part of my brain kicked in, the part that had built a successful business from nothing. Amanda had said family's orders, not Alicia's orders. The distinction felt important. Was this Margaret's doing, with Alicia's consent? Or was Alicia being manipulated into decisions that weren't truly her own? Either possibility hurt, but in different ways. If Alicia had chosen this, our relationship was damaged beyond what I had realized. If she was being manipulated, she was still the little sister who needed protection, even from herself. And then there was the practical reality Amanda seemed to have overlooked. I owned the venue, not managed it, not worked there, owned it completely. Every blade of grass, every historic beam, every crystal in the chandeliers belonged to me. The contract for Alicia's wedding was with my company, signed by me as a formality despite my verbal gift of the venue costs. The realization didn't bring vindictive pleasure, just a hollow sadness. I had no intention of canceling my sister's wedding venue, regardless of how she was treating me. But the oversight revealed how completely Margaret and Amanda had dismissed my position and accomplishments. In their world, I was just the inconvenient sister, not a successful business owner who controlled the very ground they planned to stand on. My executive assistant, Bethany, knocked gently before entering my office. "Deanna? The linen supplier is on line 2 about the delivery schedule." One look at my face had her closing the door and approaching my desk with concern. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I've been uninvited from Alicia's wedding," I said, the words strange in my mouth. "By the wedding planner. Family's orders." Bethany's jaw dropped. "They can't do that. It's your venue." "Apparently they can. Or they think they can." I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache forming. "The wedding will proceed as planned. I just won't be attending." "That's insane," Bethany protested. "After everything you've done for Alicia? The venue alone is worth $75,000. "It's not about the money," I said quietly. "It never was." Bethany started to argue further, but my desk phone rang again. I glanced at the caller ID, Amanda Pierce. 20 minutes after hanging up on me, she was calling back. I met Bethany's eyes and put the call on speaker. "This is Deanna Walker. I answered neutrally. Miss Walker, Amanda's voice had lost all its previous smugness, replaced by barely controlled panic. There seems to be some confusion about your role at Willowbrook Estate. No confusion on my part, I replied. I'm the owner. A pause. Yes, that's what I've just been informed. When you didn't correct me earlier, you didn't ask for clarification earlier. You delivered a message and hung up. Miss Deanna. She switched to my first name, her tone now placating. We didn't know you owned the entire venue. The family was under the impression you were a manager or events coordinator there. The absurdity of the situation might have been comical if it weren't so painful. And none of you thought to ask during the 6 months of planning my sister's wedding? There's clearly been a miscommunication, Amanda said, desperation creeping into her voice. The wedding is tomorrow. Perhaps we could meet to discuss. I'll need to think about my options, I interrupted, unwilling to make this easy for her. I'll be in touch. I hung up, meeting Bethany's wide eyes across the desk. Well, that was illuminating, I said dryly. What are you going to do? She asked. It was the question I'd been asking myself since Amanda's first call. What could I do? What should I do? The vindictive options were obvious. Cancel the event, enforce some obscure contract clause, demand full payment instead of gifting the venue. But those choices would hurt Alicia most of all, and despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to ruin her wedding day. Nothing yet, I decided. I need to understand exactly what's happening before I respond. My phone began buzzing with texts. 5 in rapid succession from Margaret. I silenced it without reading them. Whatever crisis was unfolding on their end would have to wait. I needed space to process my own feelings first. Cancel my meetings for the day, I told Bethany. And if anyone from my family calls the office, take a message but don't put them through. Once alone, I finally allowed the tears to come. Years of emotional investment in my relationship with Alicia, years of trying to maintain our sisterhood despite Margaret's interference, all culminating in this cruel exclusion. It felt like losing her all over again, but this time by choice rather than circumstance. I called my best friend Camille, who had witnessed the entire saga of my family relationship since college. She listened to my halting explanation without interruption, then responded with the righteous anger I couldn't quite access yet. This is emotional abuse, Deanna, she said firmly. Margaret has been isolating and manipulating Alicia for years, and now she's escalated to completely cutting you out of a major life event. At your own venue. I know, I whispered. But what do I do? What do you want to do? Camille asked gently. The question stopped me short. What did I want? Not revenge. Not to hurt Alicia. But I did want the truth. I wanted to know if my sister had really chosen to exclude me, or if she was as much a victim of manipulation as I suspected. I want to talk to Alicia directly, I realized. No Margaret, no Amanda, no intermediaries. I need to hear from her what she actually wants. Then that's what you should demand, Camille said. Use the venue as leverage if you have to. It's time Margaret learned she can't control everything and everyone. After we hung up, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Amanda, 7 from Margaret, and a single text from Alicia. Please call me. No explanation, no apology, just those 3 words. I set the phone aside without responding. For the first time in our relationship, Alicia would have to wait for me. I needed time to consider my approach carefully. This confrontation would either heal our family or fracture it beyond repair, and I refused to enter it unprepared. That night, I barely slept. I alternated between tearful grief and cold anger, between complex strategies and simple ultimatums. By dawn, exhaustion had cleared my mind to a single realization. This wasn't about winning or losing, it was about healing. The question wasn't what punishment Margaret deserved, but what resolution would allow Alicia and me to rebuild our relationship. With that clarity came my decision. I wouldn't use the venue as a weapon. I wouldn't demand public apologies or dramatic gestures. I would simply insist on honest conversation, with all pretense and manipulation stripped away. If our family had any hope of moving forward, it had to start with truth. As the sun rose over Willowbrook's gardens, I made peace with whatever outcome awaited. I had built this beautiful place from nothing. I could rebuild my relationship with my sister too, if she was willing to meet me halfway. And if not, I would survive that loss as I had survived others. But at least I would know I had done everything possible to preserve what mattered most. By 8 that morning, I was showered, dressed, and driving to my father's house with a calm determination that surprised even me. The night's emotional turbulence had settled into resolve. Whatever happened today, I would face it with dignity and clarity. The family home looked exactly as it always had, a stately colonial with perfect landscaping and not a hint of the emotional warfare happening inside. I parked behind Alicia's car, noting that Margaret's luxury SUV and Amanda's sedan were also present. The gang was all here. Good. I preferred addressing everyone at once. Dad answered the door, his face a mask of discomfort. "Deanna," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "We've been trying to reach you." "I know," I replied simply, walking past him into the living room where the others waited. Margaret sat perched on the edge of the sofa, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. Amanda stood by the fireplace, clutching a portfolio like a shield. Alicia was curled in an armchair, her eyes red and swollen. All three looked up as I entered, their expressions ranging from panic to shame. "Deanna." Margaret was the first to recover, rising with her arms outstretched, as if to embrace me. "Thank goodness you're here. There's been a terrible misunderstanding." I stayed just beyond her reach. "Has there? Seems pretty clear to me. I was uninvited from my sister's wedding at my own venue. What part did I misunderstand?" Amanda stepped forward, professional mask firmly in place. "Miss Walker," as I tried to explain on the phone, "I'm not here to talk to you." I cut her off without looking at her. "You were just following orders, right?" "I'm more interested in who gave those orders." Margaret's expression hardened momentarily before sliding back into concerned contrition. "Darling, no one meant for things to go this far. We were simply trying to reduce Alicia's stress levels. You two haven't been seeing eye to eye on the wedding plans, and with tomorrow being so important." "Stop it," I said quietly but firmly. "No more manipulation, Margaret. Not today." My father finally entered the room, hovering uncertainly between his wife and daughters. "Deanna, please." Margaret was only trying to help. "Was she?" I asked, turning to face him. "Is that what you call uninviting your daughter from her sister's wedding? Helping?" "It was a miscommunication," he insisted weakly. "No one knew you actually owned Willowbrook. We thought you worked there." The absurdity of this statement momentarily left me speechless. I've owned Willowbrook for 5 years. I built the business from nothing. How could you possibly not know that? "You never talk about work," Margaret interjected smoothly. "And you've always been so independent. We assumed management was as far as you'd progressed." I laughed, a short, humorless sound. "That's convenient, and completely false. But it doesn't matter now. What matters is what happens with the wedding." Amanda stepped forward again, desperation plain on her face. "The wedding is tomorrow. There's no time to find another venue of Willowbrook's caliber. Miss Walker, Deanna, surely we can come to some arrangement?" I ignored her, walking instead to kneel beside Alicia's chair. My sister wouldn't meet my eyes, staring instead at her tightly clasped hands. "Alicia," I said gently, "I need to hear from you. Do you want me at your wedding?" The room fell silent. Margaret started to speak, but Dad held up a hand to stop her, finally showing a backbone I'd thought long atrophied. Alicia's shoulders began to shake. "I don't know what's true anymore," she whispered. "Margaret said you didn't want to be involved, that you were just doing this for the publicity. She showed me texts, where you said the wedding was taking too much of your time." "What texts?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Alicia, I never sent any texts like that. She has them right on her phone," Margaret insisted, reaching for her purse. "I can show you." "Those are fake," I said with certainty. Check the number they supposedly came from. It won't match mine. Alicia finally looked up, her eyes searching my face. Is that true? You never said you were tired of my bridezilla behavior? Never, I said firmly. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. My calls go to voicemail. My texts get one-word responses. I thought you were the one pulling away. I never got any calls, Alicia said, confusion clouding her features. Margaret said you were too busy with other events to talk directly, that everything should go through Amanda. We both turned to look at Margaret, whose composed facade was beginning to crack. This is ridiculous, she huffed. I was protecting you, Alicia. Deanna has always been jealous of our relationship. She's trying to make the wedding about her instead of you. By offering her $75,000 venue for free? I asked incredulously. That's an interesting definition of selfish. You own Willowbrook? Alicia asked, fresh tears forming. Completely? Not just work there? My heart broke at the genuine surprise in her voice. Yes, sis. I own every inch of it. I've been telling you about my business for years in emails and during our lunches. Didn't you read them? I never got those emails, Alicia said slowly, realization dawning. Margaret handles my personal email for wedding correspondence. She filters what comes through. All eyes turned to Margaret, whose expression had transformed from concerned to calculating. I was trying to protect our family, she said defensively. Deanna abandoned us years ago. She never cared about our family bonds until Alicia's wedding could benefit her business. I left because you pushed me out, I exclaimed, finally losing some of my careful composure. You systematically isolated me from Dad and Alicia from the moment you moved in. That's not true, Margaret insisted, turning to my father. Abraham, tell her that's not true. But Dad was looking at Margaret with new eyes, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. You told me Deanna was too busy for family gatherings, he said slowly. That she turned down our invitations because her business took priority. I never received any invitations, I said quietly. And you told me Deanna thought my law career was a waste of my potential, Alicia added, standing now. That she laughed about me working for a firm instead of starting my own business. I've always been incredibly proud of you, I told Alicia. I tell everyone my sister is a brilliant attorney. The room fell silent, as years of manipulations and miscommunications unraveled. Amanda Pierce stood forgotten by the fireplace, watching the family drama with professional discomfort. Margaret's carefully constructed narrative was collapsing, and she knew it. This is all very touching, she said icily, dropping the pretense of concern. But it doesn't change the fact that the wedding is tomorrow. Whatever your grievance is, surely they can wait until after Alicia's special day. Actually, I said, straightening to my full height, they can't, because this is my ultimatum. I will host Alicia's wedding at Willowbrook as planned, but only under certain conditions. Amanda made a small sound of relief, but I held up my hand to silence her. First, I want 30 minutes alone with my sister. Right now. No Margaret, no Amanda, no intermediaries. Second, Margaret will have no role in wedding day coordination. My staff will handle everything according to Alicia's wishes. Her wishes, not anyone else's. Third, I will be wherever Alicia wants me to be during the ceremony and reception, whether that's as a guest or part of the bridal party. This is outrageous, Margaret sputtered. After all the work I've put into this wedding, the work you've put in, I interrupted coldly, has been primarily directed at excluding me from my sister's life. That ends today. I turned to my father, whose expression held a mixture of shame and dawning recognition. Dad, I suggest you take Margaret and Miss Pierce to get some coffee. Alicia and I need to talk. For a moment, I thought he might default to his usual peace at any price position. Instead, he nodded firmly. You're right. Margaret, Amanda, let's give the girls some space. Abraham, Margaret protested, but his resolve didn't waver. Now, Margaret, he said with quiet authority. We've caused enough damage already. As they left, Margaret practically vibrating with suppressed rage, Amanda looking shell-shocked, and Dad with slumped shoulders, I turned to face my sister. For the first time in years, We were truly alone together, without Margaret's influence hovering between us. "I'm so sorry," Alicia whispered, as the front door closed behind them. I had no idea what she was doing. I opened my arms, and she fell into them like she used to when we were kids. We stood like that for a long moment, both crying, both beginning the process of finding our way back to each other. "We have a lot to talk about," I said finally, pulling back to look at her, "and a wedding to salvage." Alicia managed a watery smile. "Where do we even start?" "With the truth," I replied simply. "All of it, no matter how painful." And for the next half hour, that's exactly what we did. The living room where we had spent so many childhood hours now became the setting for our long overdue reconciliation. Alicia and I sat close together on the sofa, the physical proximity helping bridge the emotional distance Margaret had engineered between us. "I thought you were pulling away from me," Alicia confessed, wiping tears. "Every time I tried to include you in wedding stuff, Margaret would say you were too busy or not interested. And I thought you were letting Margaret push me out of your life," I replied. "The few times we did talk, you seemed distant and guarded." "She told me you thought my wedding was too traditional and boring," Alicia said, shaking her head in disbelief. "That you were just humoring me by offering Willowbrook." "I was honored you wanted to get married there," I assured her. "It felt like the perfect way to contribute to your happiness." As we compared notes, a disturbing pattern emerged. For years, Margaret had been intercepting our communications, filtering what got through, and reframing anything that did with her own toxic narrative. She had expertly played on my insecurities about belonging in the family and Alicia's anxieties about measuring up to her successful older sister. "I can't believe I never questioned it," Alicia said, genuine remorse in her voice. Looking back, there were so many red flags. "Margaret is very skilled at what she does," I said without rancor. "And she had years to perfect her technique. We can't blame ourselves for not seeing it sooner." "But I should have trusted you more," Alicia insisted. "After everything we went through together after Mom died, how could I believe you didn't care about me?" I squeezed her hand. "The same way I believed you'd exclude me from your wedding. We were both manipulated by someone who knew exactly which buttons to push." The mention of the wedding brought us back to the immediate crisis. With less than 24 hours until the ceremony, we had to decide how to proceed. "What do you actually want for tomorrow?" I asked Alicia directly. "Not what Margaret wants, not what Amanda planned, but what you want. It's your wedding." Alicia hesitated, so conditioned to deferring to others that articulating her own desires seemed difficult. "I'm not even sure anymore," she admitted. "So much of the planning has been Margaret taking over while I nodded along." "Close your eyes," I suggested. "Imagine walking into Willowbrook tomorrow. What does your perfect wedding day look like? What elements feel truly important to you and Richard?" Slowly, hesitantly at first, Alicia began to describe her vision, not the formal ballroom ceremony Margaret had insisted upon, but the garden setting she'd initially mentioned months ago. Not the elaborate 7-course seated dinner Amanda had planned, but a more relaxed atmosphere where guests could mingle. Not the traditional classical quartet, but the jazz band Richard loved. As she spoke, her voice grew stronger, more certain. I took notes, mentally calculating what changes were possible in the limited time available. Some would be challenging but doable with my staff's expertise. Others would require calling in serious favors from vendor contacts. And most importantly, Alicia concluded, opening her eyes with new determination, I want my sister as my maid of honor, where she always should have been. My pen paused over my notepad. "Are you sure? Rebecca has been planning on that role for months." "Rebecca is Margaret's goddaughter, and barely my friend," Alicia said with surprising firmness. "She was pushed on me like so many other decisions. I want you standing beside me, Deanna. Like Mom would have wanted." The mention of our mother brought fresh tears to both our eyes. I could almost feel her presence in the room, her gentle guidance helping us find our way back to each other. "Then that's what we'll do," I said, squeezing Alicia's hand. "But we have a lot of work ahead of us if we're going to transform this wedding by tomorrow morning." When Dad returned with Margaret and Amanda, He found Alicia and me huddled over my laptop, already deep into replanning mode. The change in Alicia was immediately apparent. She sat straighter, spoke more confidently, and held eye contact in a way she hadn't done around Margaret in years. "We've made some decisions," she announced as they entered the living room. "The wedding is still happening at Willowbrook, but with significant changes." Amanda's professional mask slipped momentarily as panic flashed across her features. "Changes? But everything is confirmed. The vendors, the timeline, the setup will all be adjusted," I finished firmly. "My team is already making the necessary calls." Margaret's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Alicia, darling, you can't possibly rearrange an entire wedding in one day. Think of Richard's family, the guests." "I am thinking of them," Alicia replied with newfound confidence. "I'm making sure they attend the wedding Richard, and I actually want, not the one you've been orchestrating." Dad placed a restraining hand on Margaret's arm as she began to protest further. "I think we should listen to what Alicia wants," he said quietly. "It is her wedding, after all." The next 12 hours were a whirlwind of activity. We relocated to Willowbrook, where my executive team sprang into action with remarkable efficiency. Years of handling last-minute wedding crises had prepared them for exactly this kind of challenge. "The garden ceremony is absolutely doable," my landscape director confirmed after a quick assessment. "We were already maintaining it as a backup option, given the forecast." She tactfully didn't mention that Amanda had dismissed this suggestion multiple times. "The jazz quartet Richard wanted is available. They had a cancellation," my entertainment coordinator reported, hanging up from yet another call. "They're actually excited about playing Willowbrook." One by one, the pieces fell into place. Vendors I had built relationships with over years in the industry stepped up, rearranging schedules and making substitutions. My kitchen staff adapted the menu to Alicia's preferences, creating a more relaxed dining experience while maintaining the elegance the occasion deserved. Through it all, Alicia stayed by my side, making decisions with growing confidence. Each choice seemed to strengthen her, as if reclaiming her wedding was helping her reclaim herself. Margaret made several attempts to reassert control, alternating between honey-sweet concern, "Darling, you're exhausting yourself with all these changes," and thinly veiled threats, "Richard's mother will be appalled by this casual approach." Each time, Alicia stood firm, sometimes with my support, sometimes entirely on her own. Amanda Pierce, professional to the end despite her obvious discomfort, adapted to her diminished role with grudging competence. "I'll need the updated timeline as soon as possible," she requested stiffly. "And clarification on my responsibilities tomorrow. Coordinate the transportation and guest arrivals," I instructed her. "My team will handle everything on site." As evening approached, Richard arrived with his best man to check on the progress. His reaction to the transformed plans was immediate and enthusiastic. "This is what we wanted all along," he exclaimed, spinning Alicia in a joyful circle. "The garden ceremony, the jazz band, how did you pull it off?" "Deanna," Alicia said simply, smiling at me over her fiancé's shoulder. "She made it all happen." Richard approached me with genuine gratitude. "I didn't know you owned Willowbrook," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for everything you're doing. This is going to be the wedding we actually wanted, not the society event it was turning into." His sincere appreciation confirmed what I was beginning to understand. Margaret's manipulation had affected not just Alicia and me, but Richard as well. The wedding had been hijacked from both of them, their preferences dismissed in favor of Margaret's vision of what was appropriate. As midnight approached, most of the major changes were in place. Staff would continue working through the night on details, but the framework of the transformed wedding was secure. Alicia and I stood on the terrace, overlooking the gardens, exhausted but satisfied. "I can't believe we did it," she said wonderingly. 24 hours ago, I was dreading my own wedding. Now I can't wait. "That's how it should be," I told her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "It's your day, not Margaret's." Alicia leaned her head against mine, a gesture so reminiscent of our childhood that it made my heart ache. and you'll be standing next to me, where you belong. As long as you're sure that's what you want, I said, still cautious after so much manipulation. It's what I've always wanted, Alicia said firmly. Margaret just made me doubt everything, including myself. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, we shared a moment of peaceful silence. The garden below was transformed, with twinkling lights nestled among the flower beds, and an elegant white arch positioned precisely where the morning light would illuminate the ceremony. In a few hours, Alicia would become Richard's wife here, surrounded by beauty that honored both the occasion and their authentic wishes. "Do you remember when we used to watch the sunrise with Mom?" Alicia asked softly. "Those mornings when she'd wake us early and we'd sit on the porch with hot chocolate?" She said sunrise was a reminder that we get fresh starts every single day, I recalled, my throat tight with emotion. That no matter how dark the night was, morning always came. "This feels like that," Alicia said, gesturing to the brightening horizon. "A fresh start for us, for our family." As the sun's first rays touched Willowbrook's gardens, illuminating the venue that had become my life's work, and would now host my sister's transformed wedding, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe this painful confrontation had been necessary. Maybe from the ashes of Margaret's manipulation, something healthier could grow. "We should get some rest," I said practically. "Ever the big sister. It's going to be a big day." Alicia nodded but didn't move immediately. "Deanna, thank you. Not just for the venue or fixing the wedding, but for not giving up on me, even when it seemed like I'd given up on you." I hugged her tightly, feeling the last pieces of my broken heart begin to heal. "Sisters are forever," I whispered. Mom was right about that. The morning of Alicia's wedding dawned clear and perfect, as if nature itself approved of our reconciliation. Despite having slept barely 3 hours, I woke with a sense of purpose and peace that had eluded me for weeks. Today wasn't just about a wedding. It was about reclaiming family bonds that should never have been broken. As maid of honor, a role officially bestowed during our frantic replanning, I joined Alicia in the bridal suite early. The other bridesmaids, a mix of her law school friends and cousins, welcomed me with varying degrees of surprise and warmth. Rebecca, the previously designated maid of honor, was noticeably cool, but I couldn't blame her for the awkward position Margaret's machinations had created. "I brought something for you," I told Alicia quietly, as the makeup artist worked on her face. I handed her a small blue velvet box that had been in my safe for years. Alicia opened it carefully and gasped. Inside lay our mother's pearl earrings, the ones she had worn on her own wedding day 36 years earlier. "I thought these were lost," she whispered, tears threatening to undo the makeup artist's careful work. "Mom gave them to me before she died," I explained, my own voice unsteady. "She made me promise to wear them at my wedding and to let you wear them at yours. Something borrowed and something blue all in one." The makeup artist discreetly stepped away as Alicia's composure broke. "She knew she wouldn't be here," she said, the realization hitting her anew even after all these years. "But she made sure a part of her would be," I replied, helping her fasten the delicate earrings. "She's with us today, Alicia. I can feel it." The door opened, and Dad entered, stopping short at the sight of his daughters embracing. "Everything okay in here?" he asked cautiously. "Everything's perfect," Alicia assured him, wiping away tears without smudging her makeup, a skill all brides seem to develop. Deanna brought Mom's earrings. Dad's eyes misted as he recognized the jewelry. "Elizabeth would be so proud of you both," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "And I am too. Especially you, Deanna. After everything, the way you stepped up for your sister. That's what family does," I said simply, though his words meant more than he could know. "Yes," he agreed with unusual firmness. "That's what real family does." The emphasis wasn't lost on either of us. Something had shifted in Dad, too. A willingness to finally see the dynamics that had damaged our family for so long. As the ceremony time approached, I helped Alicia with final preparations, then took my place to precede her down the garden path that served as our aisle. The transformation of Willowbrook was complete. Flowering branches formed a natural cathedral around the seating area, the morning light filtering through in a way no ballroom could ever achieve. Richard waited beneath the arch, his face lighting up as the music began. From my position at the front, I could see Margaret seated in the front row, her expression a careful neutral that didn't quite hide her displeasure at how events had unfolded. Next to her sat an empty space, where Dad would join her after walking Alicia down the aisle. For now, he stood with his younger daughter at the garden entrance, both of them momentarily hidden from the guests' view. When Alicia appeared on Dad's arm, a collective murmur of appreciation rose from the assembled guests. She was radiant in a simpler gown than the elaborate one Margaret had chosen, her hair adorned with small white flowers rather than the tiara originally planned. The change had been one of her first decisions during our replanning, a small but significant reclaiming of her own style. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. With personalized vows, Richard and Alicia had written together months ago, but had been discouraged from using. As they spoke promises of love and partnership, I found myself glancing at Dad, noting how he kept a deliberate distance from Margaret even after joining her in the front row. Another small, but telling shift in the family dynamics. At the reception, I gave my maid of honor speech, carefully crafted to celebrate Alicia and Richard while subtly acknowledging the journey that had brought us to this day. When we were little, I began, addressing the beautifully decorated garden reception, Alicia used to tell everyone she was going to marry a prince. Our mom would smile and say that what mattered wasn't finding a prince, but finding someone who would treat her like a queen. Richard, watching you today, I know Mom would approve. You see the amazing woman my sister truly is, and you honor her authenticity, her brilliance, and her kind heart. I raised my glass toward the couple. To Alicia and Richard, may your marriage be built on honesty, respect, and the courage to always choose love, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. Alicia's eyes shone with tears as she mouthed thank you across the table. The subtext of my words wasn't lost on her, or on Dad, who squeezed my shoulder as I returned to my seat. Later, during the father-daughter dance, Dad surprised everyone by asking the band to pause after his dance with Alicia. Taking the microphone, he addressed the gathering with uncharacteristic assertiveness. Today isn't just about gaining a son-in-law, though Richard is a wonderful addition to our family, he said, his voice steady. It's about celebrating both my daughters. He turned to me, extending his hand. Deanna, may I have this dance as well? As we moved across the floor to a song that had been one of Mom's favorites, Dad spoke quietly, for my ears alone. I've failed you, Deanna. For years I chose peace over truth, and you paid the price. I'm so sorry. It's not too late to change that pattern, I told him, forgiveness in my voice. Starting now. I've already started, he replied with unexpected firmness. Margaret and I will be having a very long conversation after this weekend. Things cannot continue as they have been. I nodded, not pushing for details, but appreciating his commitment. This wasn't the time or place for family therapy, but acknowledging the problem was an essential first step. As the reception continued, I noticed Margaret maintaining a careful distance, her usual dominating presence subdued by the clear shift in family alliances. Several times I caught her watching me with an unreadable expression, but she made no attempts at conversation or reconciliation. Near the end of the evening, Alicia found a moment to pull me aside into the small garden alcove where we had watched the sunrise. I can't thank you enough, she said, genuine gratitude in her eyes. Not just for saving the wedding, but for showing me what was happening with Margaret. For years, I thought I was going crazy, doubting my own memories and feelings. That's what manipulation does, I said gently. It makes you question your own reality. But you broke free, Alicia. You stood up for yourself when it mattered. Because you showed me how, she replied, squeezing my hands. You could have used the venue situation to get revenge, and honestly, no one would have blamed you. Instead, you chose healing. Revenge would have felt good for about 5 minutes, I admitted. then it would have destroyed any chance of rebuilding our relationship. Some things are worth more than temporary satisfaction. As we rejoined the reception, I reflected on the lessons of the past 48 hours. In choosing compassion over vengeance, I hadn't just salvaged Alicia's wedding. I'd created space for genuine healing. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, especially with Margaret, whose behavior stemmed from deep insecurities that a single confrontation couldn't resolve. But for the first time in years, honest communication had replaced manipulation. Reality had replaced the distorted narratives that had kept us apart. After Alicia and Richard departed for their honeymoon, I stayed behind to oversee the cleanup, a habit from years of venue management that I couldn't break even for my sister's wedding. Dad found me in the garden, looking tired but more present than he had in years. "Margaret's gone back to the house," he said, settling onto a bench beside me. "I told her I needed time with my daughters today." "That's a start," I acknowledged, appreciating his small act of independence. "It's more than that," he said seriously. "I've spent 15 years enabling behavior that hurt my children. That stops now." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I don't know what the future holds for my marriage, Deanna, but I do know I want a real relationship with both my daughters, whatever that takes." "I'd like that too," I said sincerely. In the months that followed, our family began the slow, sometimes painful process of rebuilding on healthier terms. Margaret and Dad entered counseling, with mixed results but genuine effort on Dad's part. Alicia and Richard returned from their honeymoon with a newfound clarity about establishing boundaries with family, and I found myself gradually relaxing the protective walls I'd built over years of exclusion. Perhaps the most unexpected outcome was Alicia's growing interest in Willowbrook. As a corporate attorney with event planning experience through her own wedding, she brought a valuable perspective to my business. 6 months after the wedding, she proposed a partnership that would utilize her legal expertise while allowing her to scale back her law firm hours. "Are you sure?" I asked when she presented the detailed proposal. "Working together might be complicated given our history." "I think it's perfect because of our history," she countered. "We know how important honest communication is now. Besides, Mom always said we made a great team." She was right. Our complementary skills and renewed trust created a synergy that strengthened both the business and our relationship. Planning our first family holiday without Margaret's orchestration, she had opted to visit her sister instead. Alicia and I found ourselves laughing over menu plans in my office at Willowbrook. "Remember Mom's disastrous attempt at bread pudding?" Alicia giggled, referencing a childhood Christmas memory. "The one that was still liquid in the middle? How could I forget?" I replied, grateful for the easy reminiscence that had once been so difficult with Margaret's revisionist history always lurking. Looking back on the wedding that almost tore us apart permanently, I'm struck by how close we came to losing each other. Had Amanda Pierce not made that follow-up call revealing my ownership of Willowbrook, would I have found the strength to confront the situation? Had Alicia not been willing to question Margaret's narrative when presented with contradictions, would reconciliation have been possible? What I know with certainty is this: standing your ground doesn't have to mean burning bridges. Sometimes, the strongest position comes from offering healing rather than demanding vindication. Margaret's manipulations had power because they operated in shadows, twisting words and creating isolation. Bringing everything into the light, painful as it was, allowed truth to disinfect years of emotional wounds. As for Willowbrook, it continues to be my heart's work, now enriched by my sister's contributions. The venue that almost hosted a family fracturing instead witnessed a healing that continues to unfold, one honest conversation at a time. Have you ever had to choose between revenge and reconciliation in your own family? Drop a comment below with your experience. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who might need to hear that family healing is possible, even after years of hurt. Remember, it's never too late for a new sunrise. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage in your own family journey.